How are you, Gail? Hello, welcome everyone. Give us a few moments as we start to bring people in from the waiting room, please. And do we still have folks in the waiting room? Kate?
Not at the moment. I'm assuming more people will join since we have lots more people who signed up. I'll just start to admit them as they come in.
Okay, we can probably give it 1 or 2 more minutes if you'd like,
Yep.
just to see if people click in.
Sounds good.
I imagine it's the let me grab something to eat and turn camera off as I kind of listen in mode at noontime.
For sure.
Yes.
Are we able to do that or no?
No, I'm just saying, except for us.
Okay,
We're
all right.
waiting till one.
We kind of prefer if you don't. Could make for some interesting
So I
screen
can
captures.
eat on camera, yeah?
That's what we're saying, Brad. You can eat on camera. We're sending you chili or spaghetti, something really neat to eat during this.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's why I wore my vest. Yeah, dark vest. Can't see the spill.
There
Keep
it
the shirt
is.
clean.
Strategic.
Great. Welcome, everyone. We're just letting more people in, and we'll kick it off in a moment or two. Thanks all for joining us today. Can you all hear me okay? Just give a thumbs up if the sound is working. And wonderful. Thank you. All right. Thank you, everybody, for coming on a Tuesday. And all right, Kate, do you want to kick it off?
Yes, I think I'm actually going to pass it over to our president, Miss Gail, also known as Zoom Pro here on the Zoom.
There's a story behind that, but we won't go into it right now. Hello, everybody. I am Gail Towns. I'm the president of the AMA New Jersey chapter, and I'm so excited to be here with your hosts today, Kate Capone and Eric Sheffield, who are the leadership team for our programming and events committee within AMA New Jersey. We are a fun bunch of people, which you will probably figure out before the end of this discussion today. And not only am I excited to be here with you today, but I'm super excited to kick off the Quintessential New Jersey Sectors Showcase. So yes, we're doing this today with the CPG sector, but this is a series. So it is not one and done. Kate is brimming with ideas. Sometimes she has to stop herself with how we can bring this showcase to life and really highlight all of the things that New Jersey does well. She will tell you more about that toward the end of our time together today. For now, though, my job is super simple. 1, to say welcome. 2, to say welcome to our guests. We're so pleased to have you. And to let you know that there are opportunities to join AMA New Jersey, both as a member, if you aren't already, or as a volunteer. And the two are not mutually exclusive. We love members, but we also love people who know how to roll up their sleeves. There's plenty to do to promote and marketing in the state of New Jersey. So don't hesitate to reach out. I'm going to ask you to use the chat to tell us who you are, where you're joining from today, and to share your LinkedIn credentials. We would love to follow up. For me, I am, again, Gail Towns. I am actually in Philadelphia today. I think that's the Phillies stadium in that picture above my head. I work in Philadelphia. If you are looking to become a member, our former president and member strategist, J. Major Gatus, is in the room. He's in the house. He would be happy to connect with you and answer any questions. And I actually mean that, any questions that you have. So don't hesitate to reach out. Again, you are welcome to follow us on social, follow the conversation on LinkedIn, and of course, visit us online at amanewjersey.org. Last but not least, I also want to thank our in-kind sponsor for this fiscal year, SEM Geeks. They are a digital agency based in Belmar. And with that, I'm going to toss it back to you, Kate and Eric, to get us going with all of our guests today. Thanks so much.
Perfect. Great. Thanks very much, Gail. So my name is Eric Sheffield. I have the pleasure of being kind of our panel moderator today. I've been part of AMA New Jersey for the past year or so, and love bringing together people across the industry. It's networking, it's meeting people, it's sharing some learning and knowledge. Today's focus, as Gail and Kate mentioned, is we're starting to take a little bit of deep dives in terms of, right, quintessential New Jersey sectors. What makes, I say, our state so amazing, the industries, things that drew a lot of us to it. And we have, I work in data analytics for consumer packaged goods. So my background has been working with big companies like Nielsen and IRI, a lot of training. And I currently work for a company called Crisp, and we are focused on the CPG world, and we help manufacturers and retailers partner together and leverage data and analytics, synergize things because there is so much data out there. And I know that our panelists are going to talk today about some of the trends and things that are driving the business, what they love, what they've seen change. And of course, data is key, right, to so many things that we do as marketers and business people in CPG. So with that, our panelists, Samantha Conte, Brad Eshgh, and Ellen Judson. Samantha, if you would kick it off and just kind of give everybody a minute or so on your background and kind of what you do, that would be great, please.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric. And thank you to all of AMA for having me. So my name's Sam Conte. I kicked off my career actually at a pharma ad agency, part of McCann World Group. Another sector within New Jersey, but quickly found that pharma was not really a great fit for me. And I moved to a company and held several marketing roles in a company called Bolero. They specialize in events and family entertainment. So really more in the hospitality space. But I'm with you today because in 2018, I made a pivot into CPG. I joined Unilever, and I've held several roles in Unilever since 2018. So both on the brand side, I've worked on Suave Hair. I helped run Suave Kids for a period of time, which was the biggest kids personal care brand. And I've also worked on the strategy side, so helping with a portfolio of deodorants, which included brands like Dove, Degree, Axe, Dove Men, and a few others. But currently, I am in a role managing as a senior brand manager on Degree US deodorants. So my team really focuses on the performance and operations behind the business, understanding strengths, weaknesses, using IRI Nielsen every day, and really partnering with top retailers across the US, Walmart, Target, Amazon, et cetera, to help drive the business.
Great. Thanks very much. Brad, let's move on to next is you. If you give us a little snapshot, please.
Yeah, sure. So very happy to be here, and thank you all for joining. Thank you, Kate, for reaching out amongst the sea of marketeers. I'm very excited to be here. I'm new to New Jersey, so it's great to be indoctrinated so quickly. But for those of you that I don't know that well, which is everybody here, my name is Brad Eshgh. I'm the senior brand manager, the similar title and responsibilities to Sam at Reckitt, and my purview is the Nariva portfolio, which is a brain health supplement portfolio. My career is not been as focused in terms of marketing. I actually started my career in investment banking, which was great from an analytical perspective. But, a lot of hours. I was really fat and unhappy at some point and didn't like being on the agent side, right? So it was really transactional. I wanted to actually own a business, and my transition to marketing actually had a couple of interim steps, which included going to China, starting an ice cream business there, going back to business school at Cornell, and then finally coming out of there and going to work at Danone. I don't know if everybody's familiar with Danone, but think Dannon, Oikos, Horizon Organic, Silk, International Delight. So I got to work on the Silk portfolio there. And then I came to Reckitt in 2020, right in the midst of the pandemic. And just like you, Sam, I actually got to work on the strategy side, right? Upstream thinking and thinking about how we cultivate a 3 to 5 year view for our Mucinex portfolio, and then held various activation roles within the Mucinex side of the business, and then just recently transitioned over to the role I'm in now.
Thanks so much. And we'll kind of dig into some of the things that drew you to CPG and kind of talk about background. So I say last, but definitely not least, Ellen Judson. Ellen and I have been friends for a long time, and we geek out a little bit on CPG and data analytics and all kinds of things. So Ellen, if you would give us your background, please, and then we'll kick into the panel.
Sure, great. Thank you. Thanks, Eric, and AMA as well. As opposed to these two, I am the lifer marketer in the group. I started my career actually at a global PR firm. So public relations was where I really started on the agency side. And I did that for 3 years before going back to business school and then jumping into CPG right afterwards. Back then at what was Wyeth Consumer Health, now Pfizer. Again, what was then a fairly small brand called Advil. So a long time ago. It's grown just a little since then. But throughout my career, I've worked in CPG. I've worked in B2B marketing at specifically at a company called Covance, which is a contract research organization. And I've done nonprofit marketing as well for Music and Powers Foundation and a couple other foundations as well. So I've kind of done the spectrum of all of it. I am back at CPG now. I have been for about 8 years at Church & Dwight as a consultant and working in both domestic and international businesses. So everything from Vitafusion to OxyClean to Arm & Hammer, you name it, I've probably touched it. So all good.
Well, and thank you for the background. I think that also kind of tells us, right, that when you think about CPG and products, when you think about the range of products that this group has worked on, it's not just food, it's not just beverage, it's not just personal care, right? It really scopes a very wide range. And I think the definition of CPG is expanding too, and we'll talk about that a little bit as we kind of get into it. So, great, let's kick it off. And again, if you have questions, pop them into the chat. Kate will monitor it. The goal is that we talk for 45 minutes and then have time at the end for more open Q&A, okay? So Brad, kind of first, I'd like to start with you in terms of the first question. So what drew you to kind of make the move, right? Other than you said, long days and so forth from kind of the investment banking world, what brought you over to kind of more the traditional consumer packaged goods? Because it's, other than the data part, not necessarily a natural bridge that people would see, right? So what was your draw?
Yeah, so it was not a very clear move for me either. I don't know how everybody else started their career, Sam, Ellen, or everybody else on the call, but like I had a preconceived notion that marketing really was more of just a support function and really had to do with comms. I didn't think, at that point it was something that you could use to really, truly, and meaningfully drive your business, even going into business school. So when I was in China, we started an ice cream company, and we made so many mistakes now just in terms of general KPIs or brand building that I would have gladly gone back and taken let's say a mulligan on. But what I really loved again was trying to figure out from a consumer packaged goods perspective, right, via ice cream, like how do you grow a business, right? And one of the things that we learned was that again, comms were just one of the levers you could pull. And they're a significant lever, but it was just one. And then when I went back to business school, it was great to meet other peers in that cohort that were really intent on CPG marketing, brand management. And it was actually through the advice of one of my friends that said, look, if you're looking for a true general manager position, learning, having the ability to lead a business, really CPG is a fundamentally great training ground. Because it is a hub and spoke model, and it varies between different organizations, right? Everybody has their own flavor of it in terms of where your focus tends to be. But by and large, you are a general manager of a brand or a portfolio or of a category or of an entire business unit. And so to me, it was the logical next step as I looked to progress as a general manager, as a leader of a business. And day by day, I just love it more and more. I got to tell you, it is, like you said, Eric, it is analytics. You get to jump into comms. You get to work on supply chain issues. You get to work with your manufacturing partners. You get to work with insights. It is so cool. And I'm just very grateful to be in this position. And it is one of the most unexpected joys that I've found in the last several years.
Other than ice cream, of course. Right.
Yeah, that's just fundamental. That's a given.
So great. No, thanks for sharing your perspectives. Sam, I'd love to get, you also kind of didn't start out in traditional CPG, although you were in marketing and communications and related. So how did you kind of make that move? And, you're working with big brands as well. So what's it like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I always loved products. I was always interested in products, big brands, and really had a curiosity around how they work. I think when I started, to look outside of the hospitality industry, I wanted to work for brands that I personally related to. And for example, within the Unilever portfolio, I grew up where my mom and my grandma always drank Lipton tea, and that was a Unilever brand. We always had Q-tips in the house. Of course, my mom put my Halloween, makeup on with Q-tips, and we always had Dove in the house. It was a staple brand. So I really loved the fact that CPG brands and products related to my everyday life. And I still love it today because it's an opportunity for your friends and family to actually know what you work on. I think in a lot of times people, it's kind of an unclear area where people work, but when they know your brand, they can give you feedback. They can really tell you what they think, good or bad, either way. But the personal connection is what really, really brought me into CPG. And then I would just add too that I think an opportunity in the CPG space and at a company like Unilever or Reckitt is getting to touch different brands. So some smaller, some bigger, but like Brad said, really get those foundational skills. So I think the breadth of experience you get at a company like this is also something that drew me in.
Great. Thanks very much. And I agree with you in terms of that tangible piece. That's one of the things that always drew me, right? Being able to see the product, see it on shelf, touch it, use it, all of that, right? So Ellen, that kind of, right, you're, I say the traditional CPG marketer. So kind of why did you pursue CPG, but then kind of what's kept you, right, overall engaged in the CPG market?
Sure. Well, to take though a step back, my story is somewhat similar to Brad's, even though I was in a marketing function, but being in PR is what actually opened my eyes to why do I want to do marketing? And that's because in PR, I worked at a very large firm and I had clients like Merrill Lynch and the US Army, but I also had Perrier and Lifesavers. And it was those latter brands in particular where we were part of a multi-agency team working on everything from advertising to PR to promotions that I kind of saw, wait a minute, PR is just one little spoke in the wheel. I use the same exact analogy. So that's when I had made the decision to go back to business school so I could be the hub and do it all as opposed to just one piece. So I must say we actually mirror each other. But again, you've all said it. CPG brands are the brands that you can connect with as an individual ourselves. So when you work on something that you believe in, you love, you can touch, you can feel, it's just more exciting. It's more fun. I totally enjoyed my B2B experiences, but it was in a medical field that I didn't truly, completely understand necessarily the intricacies of what I was working with because I'm not a doctor. So when you're working on brands that you use, it's just that much more fun.
No, that's a great point, right? And when you go into, and by the way, I see a range of folks, on this from, folks that are in school to people that are working at Unilever and different companies and careers. And then hopefully everybody, right, as you think about your perspectives, what Ellen's talking about is making it tangible and understand the products, right? The research we do, the focus groups, the research or whatever, being able to, like say, relate to the product and understand the workings and then the application of them and the benefits, right? That does become the really, I think, the fun part. So each one of you has kind of mentioned it a little bit, but kind of curious. So like, does anybody want to share? Is there something that you found, something somewhat unique? So I know we talked about the tangible piece, but by working in CPG, has it brought you anything unique in your career or experiences that you don't think you would have gotten if you kind of stayed in the areas that you had been in? And I'll open it up to anybody to, Samantha, Ellen, or Brad.
Sure. Well, for sure, as I just said, again, when you work B2B, you're not talking to consumers. And to me, the best part about CPG is talking to your consumer, learning who they are, who are you going to target, what's the best way to target them. B2B, you are talking to a company. So it's a very different type of marketing. And as I say, CPG to me is just that much more relatable and interesting.
Samantha, I think you had something to.
Sure. I would add, I think CPG for me really gives that end-to-end process perspective. So really seeing a product just at its initial concept stage, travel through all of the changes that it goes through selling it into retailers to actually seeing it on the shelf with all the manufacturer glitches and the fun that comes between that, it's really rewarding. So I don't think you get the opportunity to see that full end-to-end experience in other industries.
That's a
Yeah,
great way to think about it, Brad.
I think Sam and Ellen just did a fabulous job describing like the fun part of this, yeah, which is like it's just so dynamic, yeah, day to day. We get to talk to our consumers. We get to work. Sam highlighted this earlier too. We get to talk to Walmart. And there is a fundamental tension sometimes between who you need to prioritize, depending on where your KPIs are in that week. And then on top of that, and I think, you know, Ellen kind of touched on this, we get to play both in the business side, but then we also get to play with the creative. Like, so for example, like in 2 days, I have to fly out to our shoot for our new campaign for 2024, right? But we just had a business review yesterday in terms of some of the drivers that we need to instill for, you know, kind of a fast start in Q1. It's just a fun, dynamic job. And as Sam said beautifully, it's end to end. Like it's just really cool. And we have fun jobs, I have to say.
Well, I agree. I think on that piece, right? I always say like you have to have fun with what you do. You spend too much time at work, right? And with the people that you're doing, right, working with, to not have some fun at it. So whatever kind of way you bring that together, like you, I'm getting on a plane in a couple of hours and I'm going down to Bentonville, and I've got meetings with some of our clients that specifically work with Walmart, and it's just really great hearing the dynamics, right? It's not just we're not just selling a widget. It's how does it work through the whole process, and what do the consumers want? And it's just tons of fun. So let's shift, if we could, a little bit in terms of, I'd love to give for some of the folks that are here listening in a little bit of the feel of some of the day-to-day. So if you're a marketer working in a consumer packaged goods company, and by the way, when we say CPG, right, traditionally people think of it's a bottle of soda, it's a can of soup, it's a roll of toilet paper, you know, whatever it is. But I want people to also think a little bit broader. I was on a panel recently with a gentleman from Casper Mattress. I think of them as a CPG product in some way, right? Because they're marketing in the same manner. Harry's Razor Blades, right? DTC. It's a CPG product. So think about it really as consumables and start to think about the range, because we're going to get into a few questions in a few moments that I'd really love people to think more broadly than just traditionally quote what you see on Walmart or supermarket shelves. So Samantha, if I could, or Sam, sorry, we'll start with you. Give us a feel, if you could, of what's a day in the life for you as a marketer at Unilever.
Sure. It's a tough question because, as Brad alluded to in the beginning, you are the center of the brand. So you could be talking to finance 1 minute and R&D the next, and finish your day with supply chain. It's really a mix of what's going on, in the brand that day. But to give just some highlights, I think my days typically involve a couple things. So consumer insights research in one way or another, whether it's speaking directly with a consumer, reviewing data around trends, around consumer needs. That's always driving, the focus of what we do. I think from a more operation lens, forecasting the business, tracking, the performance of the business, what's working and what isn't, and how do we pivot as a result of that. Whether that's, big strategic priorities, or at times working directly with a retailer team and talking about the nuance at that specific retailer. I could be preparing a presentation for a retailer to sell in a new product. So there's really a whole host of things involving a lot of different people, both internal and external, that I work with on a day-to-day basis.
Great. Thanks. And I think some of the things you shared, right, talk about that whole general manager component, right? It's a bit of everything. So Brad, what about you? Kind of what's, I say, a day in the life? And if you could just tell people quickly, what is Nariva? Because I'm not sure everybody would even recognize or knows the product name. Sorry, but you could give that quick heads up.
Yeah, so Nariva is actually a brand. It's interesting. It was launched, typically we see smaller we're going to get into this probably a little later, but we see smaller brands that tend to grow to a certain point in scale that then get acquired. What doesn't happen as often now is large CPG launching brands in-house. And Nariva is actually launched by Reckitt in-house. It is a brain health supplement. And so it's in the, the vitamins, minerals, and supplement space, which our friends at Unilever are a wonderful competitor of ours. With Nariva specifically, right? It is about, kind of improving cognitive health. So the household penetration, to your point, Eric, is significantly lower, let's say, than general, multivitamins and things like that, right? Household penetration is probably in the 2.5% range. Yeah. Panel's still a little murky on this end, but that's what that is.
It's on the lower end of traditional consumer products, I think.
Yeah. So the name of the game, and as Sam kind of talked about earlier too, there are different tactics you assume depending on where the brand is. So the brand is, very sizable, but still a lot of household pen, to garner for the category. So, the name of the game right now is awareness and relevance. Yeah. So the interesting part about this is I would say maybe week to week to what Ellen and Sam have kind of talked about in terms of the variance of our roles, but depending on where we are in the planning cycle, day to day, we look at our P&L and our kind of in-market performance relative to our competitors. What's the category doing? And then we spend time talking to, our sales teams, right? Our customer teams. Or is there any feedback or requests coming from the customer? Are they seeing certain issues at the very, kind of store tactical level? Are we getting questions then from our management teams in terms of, hey, why are we, where are we tracking against our kind of KPIs for the year? Like, what's our market share, right? In terms of top line revenue growth, how are we doing? Even if they might look at gross profit, right? So a lot of questions around financial performance, in-market performance. And then now, for example, I'll spend time with our creative agencies around how are we tracking towards the execution of our, new campaign, right? Because that's going to be a big initiative for us in January. So tracking to make sure that that's, happening on time. And, again, talking to supply almost every day to make sure that we have the product on shelf we need. As everybody is well aware, that is always a pain point, or a point of optimization. Yeah.
There you go.
Especially
Always focused on the opportunity, right?
Yeah. Especially as retailers look to call down their inventory levels, I think we're all going to have to pay that much more attention to it. So no one day is the same.
Okay.
So you gotta stay sharp. Take your Nariva, by the way, it'll help.
We'll be sure to, and that seems to be a bit of a consistent theme. And by the way, for anybody that didn't know, when Brad was mentioning, household penetration or HHPen, that just reflects kind of in the Nielsen and IRI world, what percent of households are actually buying a product. Doesn't mean that everyone in the household is using it, but a household penetration of 10% just means 10% of U.S. households bought it over the past 6 months or a year, depending upon how you're slicing it. So as Brad was saying, Sam may be working on products that, 80, 90% of households buy the category for bread. You're probably at 5, 7, 10% for the entire category, let alone individual products. So it gives you kind of an idea of comparison. So Ellen, you've been in different roles, and I know as, in-house and as a consultant working with a number of companies. So, give us a feel for kind of your day-to-day, and kind of how things in marketing communications maybe have changed a little bit over time.
Sure. Well, to answer the second part of your question first, things have definitely changed in the years that I've been in this business. For instance, back at the beginning, you really, as a brand manager, worked with just 1 or 2 agencies. You had an ad agency, and they did the advertising. There was print and TV, and they did the media buying. And then you might have had a PR agency, like where I'd come from. And maybe if the circumstances merited it, a promotional agency who might have helped with a special event or something. Now we work with advertising agencies, media buying agencies, digital agencies, packaging agencies, shopper marketing agencies, public relations agencies. So the spectrum of the team has grown. You work with, so as much as we are the general manager, we are managing not only people internally on our teams, our assistants and the people around us, we are managing and working with multiple agencies on the outside. So that is certainly something that has changed since I began. And every day I would say, working with either external agencies or just even people internally at now Church and Dwight, who specialize in shopper marketing. So they might be my liaison to the outside agencies. So that is something that certainly has evolved as marketing has evolved over these years. So I find that quite fascinating.
Great, thanks. And is there anything, so you mentioned, I love one of, and I wrote this down, like when you said the spectrum of the team has grown. So to me, that means, right, you are managing a team, right? And there's a group of resources, internal, external, and partners. So that whole concept of a team really does bring you back to the whole general manager concept, right? In terms of working across all those pieces.
Yep. Yep.
Great. So thanks. So the next piece, and Ellen, you alluded to it a little bit, but I'd love to kind of, kind of go to you first in terms of thinking about some of the changes, not as much in terms of, right, kind of the number of agencies or kind of the groups that have input, but can you talk a little bit about the emergence of digital platforms? I say kind of digital as this umbrella, and then also kind of when you're thinking about a consumer landscape, how do you take kind of more? So it's really two parts. One is changes in terms of kind of digital and social and what that's done for kind of you as a marketer. But then also, how do you think of a broader market? Because now, because of all the changes in, right, digital and so forth, it's not just marketing to North America potentially. You may have a global audience, whether you intended to or not. And I know you've taken products globally. So give us a feel in those realms if you could.
Sure. Well, I think probably all three of us on the panel here would agree that the single most important thing is staying in touch with your consumer and adapting to how your consumer is going to receive your message. So, as I say, we've had many changes over the years, and one in particular is how to talk to that consumer. Is it TikTok or Instagram? Is it sponsoring podcasts? None of these things, were around 10, 15 years ago. So we have to make sure we are talking to the right consumer at the right time. So that is certainly something that as a marketer, you have to adapt to. When it comes to my international work, products, first of all, not every American product is in global markets right now.
Sure.
And vice versa. I actually am working with products that aren't in the US that are overseas marketing and expanding globally, just perhaps not to the US. So again, it's many of the same issues. You have to do your consumer research. You have to know who your target is. We are repositioning a feminine wash product right now that's based out of the UK. And how are we doing it? We are talking to our consumers. So you have to always be in touch with your consumer. That is by far the most important thing, and something you always have to be adapting. So.
From a consumer research perspective, can you give a little flavor of how maybe that's changed over time from what you did, 5 or 10 years ago versus the plethora of, ways now?
Sure. Again, back in the day, most research was conducted behind a two-way mirror in focus groups, and you would talk again one-on-one with consumers. And even though you would do it in multiple markets throughout the country to feel like, so you get a good representation of your US market, right? You're not just going to talk to Northeasterners or just people who live down south, but you still were limited. There was quantitative research, which is bigger group research, but now with digital platforms, your research can go into the thousands if you need it to be. You have panels out there. You have all sorts of groups that people are part of that digitally they can take, do answers to surveys and questionnaires. I'm sure many of you have gotten these before. And with that, your data is that much more robust, and you can really get a good sense of who your consumer is or what it is, that outcome. It could be also, new product research Sam was mentioning. You have 4 different concepts. You don't know which one's going to be the winner. So you test different positionings with consumers, multiple consumers through, again, online research. And you get, again, such a bigger abundance of data with which to make your decisions, which is really helpful.
Which probably, and thank you for the context, but it probably also creates its own challenges, right? So much data. How do you bring it all in? What do you, prioritize, analyze, all of that, right?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, I mean, and
gotta go with your gut.
To add to Ellen's point, like think of the millions of ratings and reviews that are out there. Think of every comment on a brand's social post. I mean, those are your consumers talking to you. Those are them telling you what they love and hate. And so it's certainly an endless amount of information that we can gather now.
It's an interesting way to think about it, kind of, endless amount, right? So where do you kind of cut it off and how do you set those guidelines? And I'm sure each of your organizations kind of has your own approaches. I kind of want to shift a little bit, Sam, in terms of some of your kind of specialty areas. So as you work with Unilever, right, one of the biggest in the world, but talk a little bit about sustainability and eco-conscious, because as we talk about, consumers and research of the quote product, it's a huge component, right, of what people are looking for. And obviously Unilever is one of the leaders globally, right, in terms of kind of pushing things forth. So give us a feel for kind of what you do there and kind of what you maybe see coming and how it's changed how you think of things as a marketer.
Yeah, absolutely. So Unilever is definitely a leader in this space. It's one of the things that attracted me to the company, honestly. Over a decade ago, they put out a sustainable living plan, so have really started to set the blueprint for corporate sustainability. I would say that as an organization, sustainability is just embedded within our business strategy and within our growth plans. So we know now, putting on the marketer hat for a minute, like, that consumers care and want to make a positive impact on the environment, but it can be difficult as a consumer. So it's our job to really think of ways to make it frictionless for the consumer. So that's doing things like incorporating more recycled content into our packaging. It's reducing emissions across our value chains and working as a full organization and a cross-functional team to make these really easy ways for consumers to be more sustainable without necessarily changing a behavior. I think that the future of it is just more interest and more focus on sustainable products from the consumer lens. I think I'd be remiss to say though that it's not a trade-off. Consumers still want quality products, and you have to deliver that. You have to deliver a fair price, for those products. But sustainability is growing in its importance, so it will only continue to have more and more focus as the years go on.
It's interesting probably as you do your research, right, and you start to see the balance, right, and the impact as you look at your overall scores of, product concepts and all that, the different factors. But in the end, right, it still comes down to, like you said, a good product at a fair price. And of course, you have to be able to find the product, right, on shelf when you want it.
Exactly. Yep.
Interesting. Thank you. And by the way, folks, please capture any questions, pop them into the chat. In a few moments, we're going to open it up for some other questions. So Brad, working on something that's, I'm not going to say it's an alternative category, right? But it's a different, right? It's not one of the larger categories for Reckitt at this time, but it's obviously growing tremendously. So talk about I'm going to call it almost a super growth category, right? And the fragmentation of nutritional supplements, nutrition products, things like that. And kind of what do you see coming and, why is this such a big growth area for Reckitt and kind of what do you see coming in the segment? Because this will be a key one kind of for our local economy, right? It's a big growth one.
Yeah. So I think what's quite interesting is that we've seen just general self-care growing, right? So I think as healthcare alternatives become traditional healthcare treatments and alternatives become more and more expensive, I think the onus has come onto the consumer to look to self-care, right? And these are spaces, by the way, that Unilever and Church & Dwight play in quite readily, right? So VMS, upper respiratory, things like this, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So I think every single one of us, if you look at each of the broader portfolios, an emphasis has been placed on these things in terms of even just from a investment perspective. I think, there also tends to be probably a favorable margin mix in each of these categories, which is another reason for, each of us to play in here. But
Yep.
Knowing that from a consumer lens, that the onus is on them, I think we are trying to stay ahead. And to Ellen's point too, we spend a lot of time, and there are countless platforms through which to reach the consumer, but understanding again where their pain points are, where they need help, right? Where is the tension in their lives, and how can we as Reckitt, Unilever, Church & Dwight, et cetera, and our brands bring solutions to those folks. Within brain health, we do know, right, there's a growing conversation, right? I think around brain health, which is tied to things like mental health, but specifically brain health as it pertains, let's say, to things like Alzheimer's and dementia,
Yeah.
which obviously are a really prominent issue within the United States. So that has now led the conversation about making sure that you have brain health. I mean, I think we know very well, like household penetration, for example, right? For things like joint health and heart health, quite high, probably in the 60s, 70% range.
Yeah.
There's been, that's been around for 30 or 40 years now. We're starting to see that emerge with brain health, right? Because again, we understand the impact that it has on from a public health perspective. So as that grows in the public conversation, people are now starting to proactively research solutions to improve their brain health. So again, the name of the game for us is still just reach and awareness, right? From a communications perspective, right? So how do we continue to let consumers know that the category exists, the benefits it can provide, and why it matters to them, right? And then back to Sam's well-distilled point of, at the end of the day, there's a value proposition to be had. So making sure that we're also delivering something at a price point that is accessible for for consumers, right? So it's a fantastic challenge to be working on, but it is one that really requires day-to-day management, which is why any of us are in the CPG space.
Yeah, like you said, that makes it fun. And thanks for that perspective. And I think it's really interesting because we're looking at folks that work, Ellen may be focused on businesses that could be large in other parts of the world, bringing them here. Samantha's working on some of, we call kind of killer categories, right? That are just staples. And Brad's talking about things that are, growing, but also have a ton of education and long-term impact potential. So it's nice to have that kind of variety. Thanks all for your feedback. I want to kind of turn it around a little bit and say we've got a lot of folks that joined us today that may be looking to enter CPG or maybe make a change in their career or kind of think about what's next for them. So I'd love to go around a little bit and just kind of give a thought of, so Ellen, I'll pick on you first. We're friends, but I'll kind of pick on you first. Are there things that you could suggest to someone looking to come into the industry, whether they're experienced overall or not? Things that are kind of table stakes in terms of skills and things that you could suggest they think about or bring with them as they try and make that migration or entry point?
Sure. I think you've heard the word a lot from the three of us of being a team player. We may be the general manager or the hub, but if you are not a team player, you're not going to move your brand anywhere. So I think the ability to showcase those interpersonal skills and people skills is paramount, because not everyone you work with is like you. A lot of these supply chain people we keep mentioning, they're engineers or packaging engineers we work with when we're trying to create new cartons for our boxes. So we may not speak the same language, but we got to work together so that we can deliver that product that Sam mentioned that's fair price and something that the consumers are going to positively react to. So I think team player is key, both for your internal stakeholders, your cross-functional teams, as well as the agencies that we've mentioned over and over again. And then I think the second most important thing to anyone who wants to prove that this could be a place where they would thrive is your adaptability. I've seen it, right? I've mentioned it, the changes that I've seen over these years. One, I'm just going to add right now real quickly, Eric, that we didn't touch on really any of us, but to me is a huge change that, again, is continuing to change and evolve, which means we have to adapt, is how consumers shop and where they shop.
Absolutely.
When I started out, it was grocery, so food, or maybe drugstores, because I was on Advil and Centrum and other more OTC brands.
Yep.
Now it is mass, i.e. Target and Walmart, Costco, or Amazon. So just where consumers shop and therefore how we are reaching them has totally changed over the past 10, 20, 30 years. So again, it's that adaptability. You have to be able to adapt and pivot. And I think those are really strengths that people trying to come into this business need to showcase.
Thanks. They're great points. And I love kind of let's talk right the term omni-channel. So Zellen's talking about adaptability and kind of the whole thing. So as you hear that term, I'd love to hear, Sam, kind of what are your thoughts on skills that people need to bring, as well as a little bit on kind of the omni shopping environment?
Yeah, I think from a skill that maybe this isn't as much skills, but I think that, that passion and that interest in the the area that you're looking to go into is so important, because that's what makes your work fun day to day. You know, if you come in and you're a person who really loves discovering new products in hair care or skincare or whatever the category may be, I think that passion that you bring and that natural interest will only make you better at your job, because you're already immersed and love talking and thinking about those products. So I think just bringing that passion is really important. And then I think, you know, just from the omni-channel perspective, really thinking about, like Ellen said, the way consumers shop, and understanding why, you know, people shop in different ways, potentially going through different life stages. What are the changes that they make? So, you know, having different perspectives, I think, is also helpful to bring just to really any job, because as a marketer, you're not necessarily the target audience. So bringing a new perspective, I think, is always helpful.
Great. Thank you so much. And I say, Brad, and what about yourself? Kind of what other perspectives in terms of kind of critical skills and also just kind of changes that you see coming?
Yeah, so first of all, I love the way Ellen highlighted collaboration at the beginning. I think it's absolutely critical, right? Especially just when you think of the litany of priorities that the supply chain might have, right? You got to get them to pay attention to you one way or the other. And by the way, being a total jerk about it and just pounding the table is not going to be helpful. So we start with that as a base skill and an absolute requisite. I would say, right, there are a couple of things that I thought Sam and Ellen highlighted that I think just modest build on those. I think one, as we think about how the omni-channel experience, like how consumers shop, I would say the breadth of not only shopping, but also not channels for shopping, but channels for communication to reach your consumers. The breadth of those have grown exponentially, right? If we think about the emergence of TikTok or Instagram in the last 10 years, right? TikTok in the last less than 5, right?
Yep.
We as, you know, as business leaders need to make sure that we are clear in our priorities. You know, we need to be able to evaluate and prioritize and then kind of clearly cascade those out throughout the rest of the organization, right? Because the media side of things, you know, in terms of shopping channels, right, things are getting more and more fragmented. So we need to pick the priorities that we think will drive our businesses, right? And so to that end as well, I think, you know, as folks think about, you know, entering CPG, I would also then say, you know, take a look at creative. I think Sam kind of touched on this before too, but having passion for creative, or at least fluency in creative. Take a look at commercials out there, different campaigns, things you notice. What do you think is effective about them? What works and doesn't work? I think just flexing those muscles will help you be that much more, it will allow you to drop into CPG that much faster. And then finally, I think just commercial rigor, right? Just spend some time looking at data. What do you think? And then learning to cultivate a story from there, right? What is it telling you, right? Is it, and that could be anything. It could be your point of sale. It could be consumer panel. It could be, as Ellen kind of mentioned, just quals that you're doing with consumers one-on-one. But what are these little data points telling you in the gestalt? So I think the more you become fluent in that kind of data sifting and then, you know, being able to synthesize from that, it will help you be effective in a CPG position.
Well, thanks for those perspectives. And you actually kind of brought a piece that I'd like to bring up a bit. And then there's a question that one of our participants, Caroline, raised. But talking about data, right? I think the one other big piece that we didn't necessarily jump into is, you know, we talked about different ways to talk to consumers and so forth. Data overall, right? What do you think the expansion look? I work in the data business. I say I'm not here to sell anything, but there's so much data, and that's what we do is make it simple because it's exploded in terms of the quantity, but also the quality, right? But how do you digest and ingest that and then actually make kind of learnings and insights? So are there any thoughts in terms of kind of how you've expanded, you know, data and or what that could mean for somebody coming in to the industry?
Yeah, analytical skills are clearly very important, especially at that entry level position. I will say that often the ABMs, your assistant brand managers, are the ones doing a lot of the analysis of the consumption data and the shipment data. So shipments, the product going out, consumption is what the consumers are buying and how much, and that's the competitive analyses also have changed over the years.
Yep.
So the number of competitors any given brand has now is exponentially bigger than when I started. And every year there's more and more and more. So because, and many of that's because Amazon, you could be this tiny little business, but you're going to sell on Amazon. Well, suddenly, if you get a following, you might be a competitor to a more established brand. So analytics, absolutely, Eric, is a huge skill, especially at that entry level, and understanding how to read and sift through that data and what comes out of it. What's your recommendation?
Yeah, thanks. Any Samantha or do you guys either have
Yeah,
Brad,
I
any
mean,
thoughts on that before we jump into a question or two from the panel?
sure. I 100% agree with Ellen. Candidly, I think data was probably my biggest hurdle making a move into CPG, just the sheer amount of it and learning and gaining that skill to distill it down. I think, when you come in, like any, in any role, just keeping your clear objectives in mind and going in with a focus on what you're trying to understand from the data instead of letting the data take you down many different rabbit holes that it can do, is a really important skill. And I think it's just one that comes with experience. So it's certainly something that can be learned even mid-career in my experience, but is critical in growing your business at any stage, for sure.
Yeah, agreed. So I'm gonna move on to kind of a question or two that we have from our participants. So Caroline, thanks for putting a question in. So she's asked kind of, and this is open to the panel, what makes you try a different marketing method? And then how do you measure success, right, with CPGs on digital marketing? Are the consumers buying? What does it mean in terms of, does attribution, product attribution truly reflect what's going on? So how do you think about that in kind of this digital world in terms of trying something new and then also evaluating, right? Because ROI, return on investment, right, is critical. And that kind of comes back to the data piece. So does anybody want to tackle that one a little bit? I won't pick on anybody, but anybody want to tackle that?
Yeah, I could start. So I think
Thank
number
you.
one, from an attribution perspective, I think that I don't know how Sam and Ellen feel. Every once in a while, I look at my MMX results and I go, I don't know how accurate that data is. But I think it's always good then to look at your run rates, right? And for those of you in terms of run rates, we're just saying, like, what's the going trend just before you started with media, and to see if there is lift or increase in your sales. That's always one way to sense check it. I always take MMX, depending on the tactic and the scale of it, with a bit of a grain of salt.
And by the way, no, but MMX means marketing mix. So it's
Sorry,
kind of when you take all of your spend and all
so
your
much
activities
jargon.
and jam it together, what did you get out of all of it? It's kind of an analytical approach. So I think you're talking
Exactly.
about gut check versus sophisticated analytics, and it's kind of somewhere in between, if I'm reading that right.
Exactly. And Ellen brought this up earlier. Like, we just now have so much data, and everybody's giving it to us from every direction, either direct data or interpretation of data, right? So, ROIs and results. I would say, so like you said, there's, as Sam kind of highlighted too, you get a sense too in terms of frameworks you bring into any analytical situation where you start to cultivate shortcuts, right? Like, I know how I can, like you said, validate some of this. I would then say it also depends, as Sam highlighted earlier, what's your KPI? What's your objective, right? If my objective, for instance, is just reach and awareness, I also might settle for a lower return on investment, right? I want the impressions and engagement, for example, right? So it really just depends on the tactic and what, coming back to what Sam and Ellen have both highlighted, it just depends on what you're trying to achieve, right? But I'm always game for a good conversation with, if somebody has a new tactic they say that can help you break through.
That's great. Thanks. Ellen or Sam, other thoughts on that?
I think I just build to say, absolutely, like, keeping your objective in mind. Will this new tactic help me get there? And why do I believe this is the right place to spend my marketing dollars? I think that's really critical. And Brad touched on that. But I think it's about also being willing to take risk. And in this new consumer landscape, there's so many ways to reach people. There's so many ways that people shop, like we talked about earlier. So being able to take that risk is a big step, because we all, not everything is going to pay off. But I think, leaning in, taking the risk, and setting, those clear objectives and KPIs are the best way you're going to measure it, and then understand if it's something that you should do again, or you say, okay, I tried it, that didn't work, and you pivot to something new.
Somebody has to be first, right? So you give it a shot and see what works.
Test and learn.
Yes,
Test and
yeah.
learn.
And just
Exactly.
to build what I was to build what I was saying before, which relates to what these guys are saying, is sometimes not only do you have to take risk, but you're doing it because you have to break away from the group. You have to stand out. And because there's so many brands now in every category, sometimes you might need to do something that maybe the data doesn't completely support, but if you're a smaller brand, for instance, and you need to stand above the fray, you're going to have to do something different.
Yeah, you got to proverbially blow it up sometimes, right? And try something new.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to ask one quick little question if we could go around, and then I know Gail would like to kind of share a few thoughts, our president. So AI, right? Topic of the day. Is there anything you're doing currently where you're seeing AI impact the immediate term? And what do you think it's going to be for you longer term, or what do you want it to be? Anybody? It's a huge topic, right?
The huge topic.
I'll say, and again, I am a consultant, so I may not be as in the weeds on everything. I haven't seen it too much yet. I think there's certain parts of marketing that will see it more than others, i.e. new product development. I think they're going to be using AI models a lot more. I think there's a training I might have in that, and then somewhere in my calendar in the near future. So I think there's certain instances where the writing of these proposition statements or even advertising copy could one day be helped along by AI. But I think because marketing is so much about speaking to a consumer directly and just knowing how to talk, it's a very emotional category. It's a very emotional business. So I think thankfully we're all going to have jobs for a while.
Good. That's good to hear, probably for everybody. Sam or Brad, very quickly before I go to a couple of closing remarks.
I'll touch quickly. I think, sorry, my eye is tearing a bit. I think from what Ellen said, like it will be our job as marketers to understand where we lean in with AI and where we don't. And I don't think anyone knows the answer to that right now, but I think, like she said, it could impact everything from, creating products to the way we are speaking to our consumers. And I think it's really just going to be on us to figure out where to make the distinction of where it's appropriate to use it and where it's not. So lots more to come for sure in that space.
So interestingly enough, right, I think on the back end, it's happening, right, in terms of media optimization. We've already seen it with a lot of our partners, right, from an analytical perspective. I think there's a bit that Ellen touched on, which is there is an emotional aspect, and she also touched beautifully on in terms of distinguishing yourself from your competitors. If everybody is feeding the same language learning models, right? The same information, you're going to come with very similar output. I don't think AI is at a point where it can start distinguishing between, what we need to say versus what Unilever or Church and Dwight are going to say. But I do think that we'll be employed, quite for the next decade or so. So I think I feel safe, but it will be very interesting in terms of product development, right? I think that's one of the things I think that all three organizations that I've heard are exploring. So I'm very excited to see how that helps us cultivate a pipeline in the future.
And tons of fun to see how it all kind of works out, right?
Yeah.
Great. Well, so on behalf of everybody, I'd really like to thank all the participants that joined today, the questions, the interest. I want to thank our panelists, Brad, Sam, and Ellen, for giving us some of their time. Kate, who heads up programming for AMA NJ, wanted to just give us a couple of thoughts before we close out. And by the way, folks, if there were questions that you had that we didn't get to answer, feel free to send them on in. You can email them to Kate or myself. You'll find us on the AMA website. Send them on, and we could always get some feedback from this panel. And of course, Kate's going to talk to you about some other things of interest that are going on.
Yes. Hi, everyone. I am Kate Capone. First, thank you so much to our panelists. You dropped so much knowledge. So I saw people tediously taking notes and I wrote down some things. So appreciate you all giving us your time and nuggets. And thank you, Eric, for leading this. Such a great job. This was our first of many events. So get out your phones, scan this QR code. Please consider joining AMA New Jersey in the future, consider volunteering with us, or just stay on top of events that are going to be coming up. We have a whole gamut of events that we will be releasing information about in 2024, similar to this and others. So thank you all for joining us. Have a great rest of your afternoon.
Happy holidays, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for a great
Bye,
discussion.
everyone.
Thanks,
A
everybody.
pleasure. Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Take care.